Have you ever stood in front of a room full of people, all eyes on you, your heart beating so loudly you're sure everyone can hear it? Maybe it was during a major presentation at work, a difficult conversation with someone you respect, or even just speaking up in a meeting when the stakes felt high. That pressure, that intense visibility, it's something almost all of us have felt at one time or another. Now, imagine being able to move through those moments not with anxiety, but with absolute clarity, calm, and command. Not by pretending to be composed, but by truly being unshakable from the inside out. This wasn't just a fantasy for the Roman elite, it was a practiced reality. And their secret didn't lie in performance, but in profound private preparation. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most powerful men, wrote in his private journals, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." It's a subtle but staggering idea. What happens in the privacy of your mind doesn't just stay there, it radiates outward, shaping your presence, your actions, even how others perceive you under pressure. The Roman senators, orators, and leaders known for their unbreakable composure in the forum, the courtroom, or the battlefield weren't simply born with those qualities. They cultivated them through deliberate, disciplined, and deeply personal Stoic practices carried out behind closed doors. True poise, in the Stoic sense, isn't about masking nerves. It's about mastering your inner world so thoroughly that external chaos simply cannot disrupt you. In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on those very practices. We'll explore the hidden mental and emotional exercises the Roman elite used to train their minds, manage their emotions, and build a resilience that made their public composure seem effortless. This is about more than history. It's about timeless wisdom. These are techniques designed to fortify you against fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, tools that are as relevant in a boardroom or a difficult conversation today as they were in the Roman Senate 2,000 years ago. We're going to reveal how they used visualization, self-examination, and perspective shifting not as theoretical ideas, but as daily training for a life of grace under pressure. By the end, you'll understand that the calmest people in the room aren't lucky they've practiced, and you can too. Before you can control a situation, you must first control how you see it. This is the absolute bedrock of Stoic composure, and it all begins with a single, crucial distinction made famous by the former slave and philosopher Epictetus. He taught that some things are within our power: our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, and everything else is not. The opinions of others, our property, our reputation, our position, these are externals. The entire root of our emotional turmoil, the anxiety that shatters our poise, grows from one place, confusing what we can control with what we cannot. We invest our emotional energy in outcomes we cannot command, and then we are surprised when we feel helpless and distressed. Think of it this way: an event itself is neutral. It just is. The meaning, the weight, the emotional charge, that is something we add through our judgment. The Stoics believed it is not the criticism from your boss that upsets you. It is your judgment that this criticism is a catastrophic threat to your career and your self-worth. It is not the rain that ruins your afternoon. It is your judgment that the rain is a personal inconvenience, an offense to your plans. The event is just words spoken or water falling. Your interpretation is what gives it power over your inner state. This is the discipline of perception, the rigorous practice of stripping away the layers of reactive judgment to see the bare fact underneath. Let's make this incredibly practical. Imagine you receive a harshly worded email from a colleague critiquing a project you've poured your heart into. Your first raw impression might scream, "This is an attack, they're trying to undermine me." "This is unfair," that initial judgment triggers a cascade of physiological and emotional reactions, a racing heart, anger, defensiveness. Now, if you were to act from that place, you might fire off a retaliatory email, escalate the conflict, and spend the rest of the day seething, your composure completely gone. But what if you applied the discipline? You'd pause and examine the impression. You'd separate the event, the arrival of an email containing critical words, from your judgment about it. You'd ask, is this email truly within my control? No, it has already been sent. Is the other person's opinion within my control? Absolutely not. What is within my control? My assessment of the feedback and my response. Perhaps there is a nugget of useful truth buried in the harsh delivery. Perhaps this person is under immense stress themselves. By shifting your perception from, "This is a malicious attack," to, "This is data that I can choose to evaluate calmly," you completely drain the situation of its emotional toxicity. You reclaim the space between the event and your reaction, and in that space you find your poise. So I want you to bring to mind a recent moment that bothered you. Maybe it was a negative comment, a plan that fell through, a minor frustration. Now replay it in your mind, but this time try to see it as a Stoic would. Separate the pure, neutral event from the story you told yourself about it. What was the bare fact stripped of all your emotional commentary, and how might choosing to see it differently, not as a personal affront, but simply as a thing that happened, change how you feel and how you would respond if it happened again? This isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about understanding its source so you are no longer at its mercy. What if the worst actually happened, and you were not only prepared for it, but completely unshaken by its arrival? This is not a question designed to induce fear, but to build a profound and unassailable strength. The Romans called this practice Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it was a cornerstone of the Stoic elite's private training for public composure. While others clung tightly to their status, wealth, and comfort, fearing their loss, the Stoics did the opposite. They deliberately and systematically imagined the loss of everything they held dear. This wasn't a form of pessimistic worrying, it was a tactical exercise in emotional inoculation. By mentally rehearsing catastrophe, they stripped it of its power to surprise, terrify, or paralyze them when, or if it ever came to pass. The philosopher Seneca, a man of immense wealth and influence who advised Emperor Nero, was a staunch advocate of this practice. He wrote, "He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." He would regularly set aside time to contemplate the potential loss of his property, his status, even his own health. He didn't do this to make himself miserable, but to achieve two critical objectives. First, to reduce the sting of fear itself. By repeatedly visiting a feared outcome in the safe theater of his own mind, the terrifying unknown became a familiar landscape. The initial shock and panic were neutralized ahead of time, and second, to ignite a powerful appreciation for what he currently possessed. By vividly imagining life without his comforts, he was able to see them not as permanent entitlements, but as temporary gifts, which made his enjoyment of them in the present moment infinitely richer and more grateful. We can easily picture a powerful Roman senator, moments before entering the chaotic and dangerous political arena of the Forum, sitting quietly in his home. He closes his eyes and doesn't visualize success or applause. Instead, he courageously envisions the worst-case scenario. He imagines being publicly accused, stripped of his rank, his property confiscated by the state, and being sent into exile, forced to leave behind his family and everything he has built. He sits with the visceral feelings of that loss, the fear, the shame, the despair, and then he goes a step further. He pictures himself in that exile, not broken and defeated, but enduring. He sees himself adapting, finding simplicity, relying on his inner virtues rather than external validations. By the time he opens his eyes and walks out the door to face the real risks of his day, he is fundamentally different. He carries himself with a poise that comes from knowing that even the worst outcome is something he has already survived in his mind, and therefore something he can handle in reality. His composure is no longer dependent on everything going right. This practice is perhaps more relevant today than ever. We live in a culture that often encourages us to avoid thinking about negative outcomes, to simply manifest positivity and hope for the best. But this leaves us incredibly vulnerable. The unexpected job loss, the sudden health diagnosis, the rejection we didn't see coming. These events can shatter us because they attack a completely undefended psyche. Negative visualization is the process of building that defense. It's not about expecting the worst to happen. It's about accepting that it could happen, and in doing so, freeing yourself from the constant, low-grade anxiety of trying to prevent the unpreventable. This week, I encourage you to try this ancient exercise. Set aside just 5 minutes of quiet time. Choose one thing you fear losing. Maybe it's a job, a relationship, or your financial security. Now close your eyes and mentally play out the scenario. Don't just skim the surface. Really immerse yourself in the details of what that loss would look like and feel like. Then take the next most important Stoic step. Imagine yourself not as a victim, but as a resilient human being adapting, coping, and even finding a new path forward. Pay close attention to how this affects your mindset. You will likely find that the fear of that event diminishes, your gratitude for what you have right now intensifies, and you approach your day with a newfound steadiness because your inner peace is no longer held hostage by fortune. Imagine building an unshakable fortress within your mind, a place of absolute calm and clarity that no external event, no matter how chaotic or threatening, can ever breach. This is the powerful concept Marcus Aurelius called the inner citadel, and it was the ultimate private refuge for the Stoic mind. He didn't mean a literal castle, of course, but a mental stronghold constructed from your own reason and your deepest values. In the midst of the incredible pressure he faced as emperor, constant political intrigue, brutal military campaigns, personal betrayals, this was his sanctuary. It was his ability to retreat into this inner space that allowed him to process immense stress without being consumed by it, to make clear-eyed decisions from a place of principle rather than panic. The brilliance of this idea lies in its portability. Your inner citadel isn't a physical location you have to find or travel to. It's always accessible, the moment you choose to turn your attention inward. While the world outside might be loud, demanding, and unpredictable, this inner space remains quiet, ordered, and governed entirely by you. It's where you can separate the noise from the signal, the external circumstances from your internal response. Think of a modern leader navigating a corporate crisis, a crashing stock price, a furious board, relentless media scrutiny. Those who crumble are often reacting to every new piece of bad news, buffeted by the emotional turbulence of the moment. But the leader who maintains their composure is the one who can, even for a few seconds, mentally step back into their citadel. They reconnect with their core mission and their long-term vision. They ask themselves not, how can I stop the panic, but what is the right thing to do here? That subtle shift from reactive fear to principled action is the difference between being overwhelmed and being in command. So what is your inner citadel built upon? Its walls are not made of stone, but of your fundamental beliefs, your personal virtues. For the Stoics, these were qualities like wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Your foundation might be integrity, compassion, resilience, or a commitment to fairness. The key is to know with absolute certainty what those principles are. Because when a true crisis hits, you won't have time to figure out what you believe in. You will default to your deepest training. This is why the Roman elite practiced this retreat in moments of peace, so it would be second nature in moments of turmoil. They fortified their citadel in private so it would be impregnable in public. Take a moment to consider what constitutes your own inner stronghold. If everything else was stripped away, your job title, your possessions, your social status, what core principles would remain? What are the non-negotiable values that guide your actions when no one is watching? Identifying these is the first and most crucial step in construction. Then you begin the practice. The next time you feel overwhelmed by a stressful situation, instead of immediately reacting, try this. Pause and take one deep breath. In that brief moment, consciously retreat inward. Ask yourself, what is one value I can embody right now? If it's courage, how would a courageous person respond? If it's patience, what would that look like? This isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about choosing which part of you gets to lead the response. By continually returning to this mental fortress, you reinforce its walls, making it easier to access and harder to breach. You train yourself to carry a sanctuary of poise within you everywhere you go. The Romans intentionally sought discomfort to never be controlled by it. Think about that for a moment. In a society known for its unparalleled luxury, opulent banquets, and lavish baths, the most disciplined members of its elite were voluntarily choosing the opposite experience. They weren't doing this to punish themselves or out of some sense of self-righteous deprivation. This was a calculated training strategy, a form of mental and emotional inoculation. The logic was brilliantly simple. If you become accustomed to hardship by choice, then any hardship imposed upon you by fate loses its power to disturb your peace. You break the chain of dependency that ties your inner calm to your external conditions. If you can willingly sleep on a hard bed, then a night spent away from your comfortable mattress on a journey doesn't ruin your sleep or your mood. If you can voluntarily skip a meal, then a missed lunch doesn't make you irritable and short-tempered in an afternoon meeting. This practice was about building a fundamental resilience that made a person literally unshakable because their comfort came from within, not from their surroundings. The Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus was a powerful advocate for this, arguing that training the body was essential for strengthening the mind. He saw comfort and luxury as a subtle form of weakness, a trap that made people soft, anxious, and dependent. He famously said, "How can a person become courageous if they only seek a life of comfort? How can they learn self-control if they are only ever surrounded by ease?" For him, and for the Stoics who followed this path, voluntary discomfort was the gymnasium for the soul. Just as you lift weights to make your muscles stronger, you voluntarily embrace hardship to make your willpower and your endurance stronger. A Roman might practice this by wearing simpler clothing than his status allowed, eating plain and simple food instead of rich delicacies, or walking instead of taking a litter. These were not grand, dramatic gestures, but small, daily acts of defiance against the creeping entitlement that comfort breeds. It was a private reminder that they could do with less, and therefore they would never be terrified of having less. We can translate this ancient practice into our modern lives with incredible ease, and the benefits are just as potent. You don't need to sleep on the floor, but you could try turning the shower to cold for the final 30 seconds. That shock of cold water isn't just good for your circulation. It's a tiny battle won against your own desire for immediate comfort. It's a daily exercise in saying yes to something difficult and discovering that you are not only okay, but you are more awake and more alive for having done it. You could choose to walk to the store instead of driving, or to work through your lunch break without complaining about being hungry. The specific act is less important than the underlying principle. You are consciously choosing a minor discomfort to prove to yourself that you are stronger than your cravings and your habits. Each time you do this, you deposit a little more confidence into your mental resilience bank. You are building evidence firsthand that you can handle difficulty. So I want to pose a question to you, one that is meant to be practical, not philosophical. What single comfort could you temporarily give up this week to build your mental toughness? It doesn't have to be a big thing. Maybe it's that second cup of coffee you feel you desperately need, or the constant scroll through your phone when you have a spare moment. Perhaps it's taking the stairs instead of the elevator. Choose one thing and for a short period, willingly embrace the minor irritation it causes. Pay close attention to what happens internally. You'll likely notice a voice of protest, a part of you that genuinely wants to quit and return to the easy path. The practice is in acknowledging that voice and then gently, firmly continuing anyway. This is how you forge an identity as someone who is resilient, someone who can endure. It's how you ensure that your peace of mind is built on the unshakable foundation of your own will, and not on the fragile, ever-changing circumstances of uncomfortable life. Now let's take that resilience a step further and shift our perspective entirely literally. See your life not from your own worried viewpoint, but from the perspective of the cosmos itself. This is one of the most profound and transformative exercises in the entire Stoic toolkit, known as the view from above. It's a deliberate mental act of zooming out, of pulling the camera back until your immediate problems, your pressing anxieties, and even your entire life are seen within the vast, silent context of the universe. The goal isn't to make your life seem meaningless, but to recalibrate your sense of scale, to reveal what truly matters by showing you just how small most of our daily worries actually are. Marcus Aurelius, spending his nights in military camps on the dangerous frontiers of the empire, constantly returned to this practice to maintain his equilibrium. He wrote in his meditations, "Keep always in view how many things have come about in which the event was so loudly trumpeted as fearful, and yet in which the outcome was painless. And how many, on the other hand, have met with misfortune in the midst of the highest hopes." He would remind himself of the sheer size of the earth, and then the insignificance of even our entire planet within the infinite expanse of the cosmos. From that vantage point, his own struggles for glory, his fear of criticism, or his irritation with a difficult colleague were revealed for what they were: tiny, temporary specks on a tiny, temporary speck. This wasn't a depressing thought for him, it was a liberating one. It drained the drama and self-importance from his troubles, allowing him to address them with calm clarity rather than frantic emotion. Let's make this incredibly concrete. Imagine you just spent days preparing for a crucial job interview. You practiced your answers, researched the company, and felt ready. But the interview doesn't go as planned. You stumble on a question, the panel seems disinterested, and you leave feeling utterly defeated. For the rest of the day, and maybe even the week, this event dominates your thoughts. You replay the moment you stumbled, you feel a knot in your stomach, you worry about your career prospects. It feels massive, all-consuming. Now, apply the view from above. Close your eyes and imagine yourself floating up high above your city. See the buildings like tiny models, the cars like ants moving along lines. Keep going. See the curve of the earth, the continents, the oceans. See the entire planet, a beautiful blue marble hanging in the blackness of space. Now, from here, try to find that interview room. You can't. From here, you can't see the disappointed look on the interviewer's face or hear the answer you wish you had given. From this cosmic perspective, your interview is not a catastrophe. It is a single, microscopic event in the long story of a single life on one planet among billions. This doesn't mean the interview wasn't important to you, or that you shouldn't care about your career. It means that the crushing weight of anxiety and self-recrimination you've been carrying is disproportionate to the event itself. The event is real, but the suffering is optional. It's created by the story you're telling yourself about it, a story that collapses when viewed from a sufficient height. This practice is a powerful antidote to what we might call egocentric myopia, the natural human tendency to see our own problems as the center of the universe. It's the reason why, when we're stuck in traffic and about to be late, it feels like a world-ending crisis, even though we know logically that it is not. The view from above manually adjusts that focus. It doesn't ask you to stop caring. It asks you to care from a place of wisdom and proportion. The next time you feel that familiar tightness in your chest, that sense of being overwhelmed by a problem or a stressor, I want you to try this. Pause for just 60 seconds, breathe deeply, and consciously attempt this mental shift. Visualize the problem shrinking in size as you expand your view to your street, your country, the world, the solar system. Imagine the countless other people, right at this moment, dealing with their own challenges, their own joys and sorrows. See your current worry as one small thread in a vast, interconnected tapestry. When you return to ground level, you'll likely find that the problem hasn't magically disappeared, but its power to hijack your emotions has significantly diminished. You've created space, and in that space, you'll find the poise to handle it effectively without the drama. You reclaim your peace by remembering your place, not a small, insignificant place, but a connected and purposeful one within a much, much larger whole. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies your power. This concept, though famously articulated much later by psychologist Viktor Frankl, was a living principle for the Stoics 2,000 years earlier. They understood that our initial, raw impression of an event is not a command that must be obeyed. It is merely a suggestion, a piece of data that we have the absolute right to examine before we choose how to act. The entire architecture of Stoic composure is built upon widening this gap, this crucial moment of pause. It is in this space that we move from being reactive creatures, tossed about by every emotional wave, to becoming purposeful individuals who respond from a place of choice and virtue. The Roman elite trained in private to master this space so that in public, under the white-hot pressure of scrutiny, their response would be measured, effective, and truly their own. Epictetus, who had known the ultimate lack of control as a slave, placed this practice at the very heart of his teachings. He said, "It is not events that disturb people, but their judgments concerning them." But he didn't stop there. He gave a practical method. When you are disturbed by an impression, do not be swept away by it. Instead, say to the impression, "Wait for me a little while, impression. Let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me test you." This is the essence of the mindful response gap. It is the act of intercepting that flash of anger, that surge of fear, or that prick of insult at the door of your mind, and politely asking it to state its business before you let it in. You are not suppressing the emotion. You are simply refusing to be hijacked by it without your conscious consent. This tiny act of hesitation is where your freedom is won. Consider a scenario that is all too familiar in our modern, connected world. Your phone buzzes with a new email notification. You see it's from a colleague, and the subject line alone makes your stomach clench. You open it, and the words feel like an attack, harsh, accusatory, and perhaps unfairly critical of work you're proud of. The immediate, visceral reaction is a flood of heat to your face, a racing heart, and a torrent of defensive thoughts. The impulse is powerful and almost automatic. Hit reply and fire back a justification, a counterattack, or a sarcastic remark to put them in their place. This is the stimulus, and the knee-jerk reaction feels inevitable. Now imagine applying the Stoic pause. Instead of your finger moving to the keyboard, you lean back in your chair. You take one deep, intentional breath. You hear Epictetus in your mind. Wait for me a little while, impression. In that space of just 10 seconds, everything changes. You create distance between the event and yourself. You might ask, is this email truly within my control? No, it has been sent. Is the sender's opinion within my control? No, what is within my control? My assessment of this feedback and my chosen response. Perhaps the harsh tone stems from their own bad day or pressure from their boss. Maybe there is a tiny, valuable piece of constructive criticism buried beneath the unskillful delivery. By not replying immediately, you have not shown weakness, you have demonstrated immense strength. You have prevented a momentary emotional spike from escalating into a prolonged professional conflict that could damage a relationship and your own reputation for composure. The person who can pause in the face of provocation is the one who holds all the power in the interaction. This is the private training that builds public grace. The Stoic wouldn't wait for an angry email to practice this. They would train it in small, daily moments. They would practice pausing before complaining about the weather, before snapping at a family member over a minor irritation, or before buying something on a whim. Each time they inserted that deliberate space, they were strengthening a mental muscle. They were building a default setting of mindfulness so that when a true crisis arrived, the pause was already a well-worn habit. Their composure wasn't a lucky accident. It was the direct result of thousands of small, conscious choices to create a gap between what happened to them and what they did about it. Your invitation is to begin this training today. You don't need a philosophical treatise or a quiet room to start. You simply need to choose one situation in the next 24 hours where you will practice inserting this mindful response gap. It could be when your phone rings with an unwanted call, when you feel the urge to interrupt someone in a meeting, or when you reach for a snack out of boredom instead of hunger. In that moment, consciously decide to stop for just 5 seconds. Breathe, observe the impulse without acting on it. You are not trying to eliminate the feeling. You are simply changing your relationship to it. You are proving to yourself that you are not a puppet whose strings are pulled by every external event and internal urge. You are the one who holds the strings, and with each deliberate pause, you tighten your grip, building an unshakable poise that starts in the smallest spaces of your day. Now let's turn to one of the most personal and revealing practices of all, the private ritual of daily reflection through journaling. This wasn't about keeping a diary of events or recording gossip. For the Roman elite, journaling was a form of rigorous self-examination, a nightly audit of the soul. In the quiet hours after the day's public duties were done by the light of an oil lamp, figures like the Emperor Marcus Aurelius would take up a stylus and wax tablet, not to document what had happened to him, but to process how he had responded to it. His famous work, Meditations, was never intended for publication. It was his personal journal, a series of memos to himself, written during military campaigns, filled with reminders, admonishments, and encouragements aimed at realigning his character with his Stoic principles. This practice was the ultimate private training ground where public composure was forged. The Stoics viewed the end of the day as a sacred opportunity for reckoning. Seneca, in his letters, strongly advocated for this nightly review. He wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now become mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said. I hide nothing from myself, I pass nothing by. Imagine the power of that moment. The world is asleep, and in the stillness you hold a conversation with yourself, not with judgmental harshness, but with the honest, constructive eye of a coach reviewing game tape." The goal was to identify where you had strayed from your virtues and where you had held firm, not to wallow in guilt, but to plan for a better performance tomorrow. It was a system of continuous private feedback that ensured their public persona was not a mask, but a genuine reflection of an examined and improved inner self. So how can we implement this today? The beauty of this practice is its profound simplicity. You don't need a leather-bound journal or hours of free time. You can start with just 5 minutes before you sleep. Begin with 2 or 3 powerful prompts that mirror the Stoic focus. First, ask yourself, what did I do well today? This isn't about ego, it's about reinforcing virtuous behavior. Did you show patience in a frustrating situation? Did you act with courage by speaking up for something you believed in? Acknowledging these moments solidifies them as part of your identity. The second question is perhaps the most crucial. Where did I let externals disturb my inner peace? This is the heart of the audit. Did a critical comment from a colleague hijack your mood for an hour? Did traffic congestion trigger an outburst of anger? By pinpointing the specific event and your reaction to it, you accomplish 2 things. You separate the external trigger, which you cannot control, from your internal response, which you can, and you create a mental note for the next time a similar situation arises. You are essentially programming your future self to respond with more awareness and less automatic reactivity. This nightly practice does something remarkable over time. It builds self-awareness at a granular level. Most of us move through our days on autopilot, reacting to stimuli based on deep-seated habits we're not even conscious of. The 5-minute journaling habit acts as a gentle but consistent intervention on that autopilot. It forces a moment of pause where you transition from being the actor in your life to being the observer. If only for a few moments, you start to see patterns emerge. You might notice that your peace is most frequently disturbed not by major catastrophes, but by a certain type of interaction or a particular recurring thought. This awareness is the first and most necessary step toward change. You cannot adjust a course you're not even tracking. Consider what you might discover about yourself after just 1 week of this practice. You might learn that your sense of self-worth is overly tied to daily work achievements, crumbling a little with each small setback. You might realize that you are quick to assume negative intentions in others, a habit that fuels unnecessary conflict. Or you might uncover small, consistent acts of kindness you perform without even thinking, revealing a core virtue already strong within you. This isn't about generating a list of faults, it's about generating a map of your inner world. With that map in hand, you can navigate your days with far greater intention. Your public composure stops being an act you have to remember to put on and becomes the natural outward expression of a mind that is constantly, quietly, and privately putting its own house in order. What would a perfectly wise person do in your situation? This is perhaps one of the most practical and immediately accessible tools. The Stoics left us the contemplation of an ideal model, a figure they called the sage. The Stoic sage wasn't a mythical, unattainable superhero. Rather, it was a conceptual benchmark, a personification of perfect reason and virtue. The Romans understood that in the heat of the moment, when emotions are high and logic is clouded, it's incredibly difficult to access abstract principles. Telling yourself to be virtuous is vague, but asking, what would a wise person do, provides a clear, concrete, and actionable template for behavior. It's a mental shortcut that bypasses emotional turmoil and directly accesses our deepest understanding of right action. This was never about achieving perfection, but about having a consistent North Star to guide you, especially when you feel lost in the storm of your own reactions. Epictetus, who dedicated his life to teaching practical philosophy, constantly urged his students to have examples of virtuous lives at the ready. He said, "For this reason we have to set our minds on some expert, and when we face difficult situations, we must think of that person and consider how he would have dealt with them." He pointed to historical figures like Socrates, who faced an unjust death sentence with calm acceptance and continued to speak truth to power, or Diogenes the Cynic, who embodied radical self-sufficiency and fearlessness. The goal wasn't to imitate their specific actions slavishly. You don't need to live in a tub like Diogenes, but to channel the spirit behind their actions. How did Socrates maintain his integrity when everyone was against him? How did Cato the Younger uphold his principles even when it cost him everything? By keeping these exemplars in mind, the Roman elite were effectively building a personal board of advisors, composed of history's wisest minds, available for consultation at a moment's notice in their own private thoughts. Let's bring this into a scenario you might recognize. You've just finished presenting a project you've worked on for months. You're proud of it. Then, a colleague publicly tears it apart in a meeting, focusing on minor flaws and misrepresenting your core ideas. The immediate, raw impulse is to defend, to counterattack, to prove them wrong and make them look foolish. Your face flushes, your heart pounds. This feels like a direct threat. Now, in that critical space between the criticism and your response, you invoke the contemplation of the sage. You pause and silently ask, what would a person of perfect wisdom and composure do here? You wouldn't imagine them launching into a defensive rant. That would be beneath them. You'd see them listening calmly, perhaps even nodding to acknowledge they've heard the points. They would understand that another person's opinion, especially an unfair one, cannot diminish their own worth or the quality of their work unless they allow it to. They might respond by thanking the person for their feedback, selecting one valid point to agree with, and gently correcting any major misrepresentations without a trace of personal animosity. Their primary concern wouldn't be winning the argument or saving face. It would be acting with integrity, grace, and reason. By modeling this, even imperfectly, you completely transform the dynamic of the interaction. You emerge not as someone who was wounded, but as someone who is unshakable. This practice is powerful because it's deeply personal and adaptable. Your sage doesn't have to be an ancient philosopher. It can be anyone whose character you deeply admire. It could be a historical figure like Abraham Lincoln persevering through immense national strife with humility, a modern leader like Nelson Mandela embodying forgiveness after decades of imprisonment, or even a personal mentor, a family member, or a fictional character who represents the virtues you aspire to. The key is to choose a model whose hypothetical actions in a given situation are clearer to you than your own might be in a moment of passion. Your challenge and your opportunity for immense growth is to make this a living practice. Think of one person, real or historical, who exemplifies a calm, principled strength that you respect. Keep that figure in your mind as you go about your week. The next time you find yourself in a frustrating conversation, facing a daunting task, or feeling the pull of a lazy or cowardly impulse, pause and actively ask yourself that question: what would they do? Not in a grandiose life or death scenario, but in this small, ordinary moment. How would they handle this slow line at the grocery store? How would they respond to this unhelpful email? This constant, gentle referencing to a higher standard does something remarkable. It slowly rewires your instincts. Over time, you spend less time consciously asking the question and more time simply acting in ways that align with the answer. You are not pretending to be someone else. You are using the best of others to draw out the best in yourself, building a composure that is both learned and authentically your own. Do not just endure what happens, love it. This is the radical, transformative Stoic principle known as Ammer, the love of one's fate. It goes far beyond mere acceptance or Stoic endurance. Acceptance can sometimes carry a quiet sense of resignation, a gritting of one's teeth while waiting for a storm to pass. Ammer is different. It is an active, enthusiastic embrace of every single event that life brings your way, especially the obstacles, the setbacks, and the unexpected detours. It is the profound decision to see everything not as an obstacle to be overcome, but as a necessary and beneficial part of your unique path, a crucial ingredient in the person you are meant to become. For the Roman elite, this wasn't a passive philosophy. It was an active practice of reframing every circumstance, no matter how challenging, as a gift to be utilized, not a curse to be survived. Marcus Aurelius, facing endless wars, betrayals, and personal loss, continually returned to this idea to maintain his fortitude and purpose. He wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." Another translation of his words urges us to accept whatever happens to you, even if it seems troublesome, because it leads to the health of the universe. This is the cosmic perspective of Ammer. It's the understanding that your life is a thread woven into a vast, interconnected tapestry. An event that feels like a painful snag from your limited viewpoint might be the very thing that creates a necessary strength or redirects the entire pattern toward a more beautiful outcome. The practice is to trust that process, to love your specific thread and its necessary place in the whole, even and especially when you can't see the final design. Consider the story of a talented professional who dedicated years to a single company, steadily climbing the ladder. They defined their success and identity by their title and trajectory. Then, without warning, a corporate restructuring eliminates their position. The initial blow is devastating, a profound sense of rejection, failure, and fear for the future. The standard response is to fight this reality, to rage against the unfairness, to desperately network for a nearly identical role to reclaim what was lost, to see the event as a purely negative catastrophe that has derailed a life. Now imagine applying Ammer. This doesn't mean pretending the loss doesn't hurt. It means, after acknowledging the pain, choosing to look at this event with different eyes. You ask not, "Why did this happen to me?" but "What does this make possible for me?" This job loss, this forced ending, could be the very catalyst that finally pushes you to start the business you've always dreamed of but were too comfortable to risk. It could free you from a toxic corporate culture you had learned to tolerate. It could open up months of valuable time to reconnect with your family or retrain for a field you're truly passionate about. The setback isn't a blockade, it's a redirect. The person who merely endures this fate spends their energy mourning the closed door. The person who loves their fate turns around with curiosity and excitement to explore the new hallways that have just opened up. This shift in perspective is where your power truly lies. Resistance to what is already true is an exhausting and futile battle against reality itself. It's like shaking your fist at the rain. You'll only end up wet and angry. Ammer is the decision to put down the umbrella and appreciate the rain for what it is, to even find joy in the sound it makes on the roof and the way it nourishes the earth. It is the ultimate declaration of inner freedom because it means your happiness and your sense of self are no longer contingent on everything going according to your personal plan. Your peace is built on your ability to find value and meaning in any plan that unfolds. So bring to mind a current difficulty you are facing. It might be a professional disappointment, a health concern, a strained relationship, or even a daily irritation like a long and frustrating commute. Now I challenge you to try this ancient exercise. For just a moment, stop resisting it. Stop wishing it were otherwise. Instead, actively look for the benefits, hidden though they may be. Ask yourself, how is this situation strengthening my patience? How is it teaching me to be more resilient? How is it forcing me to develop new skills or consider options I would have otherwise ignored? How might this apparent obstacle be protecting me from a different, unseen problem? This isn't about naive positivity. It's about intelligent reframing. It's about seeking the advantage within the disadvantage. By choosing to love this piece of your fate, you are not conceding defeat. You are claiming victory over your own perceptions. You are transforming every experience, without exception, into fuel for your growth. This brings us to one of the most liberating and practical concepts in all of Stoic philosophy, a tool that acts like a mental sieve for your anxieties, the dichotomy of control. At its heart, this idea is breathtakingly simple, yet applying it can feel nothing short of revolutionary. It is the practice of taking any situation you face and rigorously, honestly sorting it into two distinct piles, the things that are within your power and the things that are not. The first pile is where you direct all of your energy, your effort, and your attention. The second pile is where you practice the art of letting go. This isn't a vague suggestion. It is the foundational teaching of Epictetus, who began his entire manual on Stoicism, the Enchiridion, with this very principle. He stated, "Some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our status, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. The entire path to a tranquil and effective life," he argued, "depends on this single skill of recognizing the difference and aligning your focus accordingly." Think about a common source of modern anxiety, an upcoming important presentation. In the days and hours leading up to it, your mind might be flooded with worries. You worry about whether the clients will like your ideas, if your boss will be impressed, whether you'll stumble over your words, or if the technology will work perfectly. According to the dichotomy of control, every single one of those worries is misplaced energy. Let's sort them. The client's reactions, their opinions, and their mood are firmly in the not within my control pile. Your boss's impression, also not within your control. The possibility of a technical glitch with the projector or the Wi-Fi, almost entirely outside of your control. Now, what is within your control? Your preparation is within your control. Your understanding of the material is within your control. Practicing your delivery multiple times is within your control. Getting a good night's sleep beforehand is within your control. Arriving early to set up and test the equipment is within your control. Your own effort, your focus, your intention to be clear and helpful, these are all yours to command. The Stoic approach wouldn't have you wasting a single ounce of mental energy on the first list. Instead, you would pour every resource you have into mastering the second list. You prepare so thoroughly that the presentation becomes an expression of your best work, regardless of the outcome. This shift doesn't guarantee success as the world defines it, but it guarantees something far more valuable, your peace of mind. You walk into that room knowing you have done everything within your power, and you are therefore free from the anxiety of trying to control the uncontrollable. The immense power of this practice is that it moves you from a state of passive worry to a state of active, focused agency. Anxiety often thrives in the vague, undefined space of what if. The simple act of writing down your concerns and physically or mentally placing them into one of two columns is a profoundly clarifying exercise. It forces you to move from a general feeling of unease to a specific inventory of thoughts. You might list my upcoming performance review as a concern. That's too broad. The dichotomy demands you break it down. Is the final rating your manager gives you within your control? No. Is your preparation for the meeting within your control? Yes. Is documenting your achievements over the past year within your control? Absolutely. Is your manager's personal biases or bad day within your control? Not at all. Is choosing to listen without defensiveness and to learn from the feedback within your control? Completely. Suddenly, the overwhelming monster of a performance review is tamed into a list of specific, actionable items you can focus on, and a list of external factors you can consciously release. So here is a direct challenge, one that could significantly reduce the background noise of anxiety in your life today. Take a moment, pause this video if you need to, and bring to mind 3 things that are currently weighing on you. Now get a piece of paper or open a note on your phone and create 2 columns. Label one within my control and the other outside my control. Now take each worry and dissect it. Be ruthlessly honest. Where does each component truly belong? The weather for your weekend plans outside, your reaction to a friend's cancellation. Inside, the stock market's performance. Outside, your monthly spending habits. Inside, the traffic on your commute. Outside, your decision to leave earlier or listen to an audiobook to make the drive pleasant. Inside, as you populate these lists, you will likely feel a tangible sense of weight being lifted from your shoulders. The outside my control column represents everything you can consciously stop carrying. You can look at it, acknowledge it, and literally say to yourself, "This is not my burden, I release it." The within my control column becomes your personal action plan, a clear and focused map for where to invest your precious time and energy. This is the daily practice that builds unshakable poise, because it trains you to stand firmly in the realm of your own power, undisturbed by the chaotic waves of a world you were never meant to command. Eloquent silence often speaks far louder than words, and for the Roman elite, this was not a passive trait but an actively cultivated discipline. In a society where public speech was a primary tool of power, they understood that the ability to hold one's tongue was an even greater source of strength. This practice of intentional silence and restraint was a private training regimen for public composure, designed to prevent reactive, emotional speech that could damage reputations, escalate conflicts, or reveal strategic weaknesses. By mastering the urge to immediately fill every silence, they transformed listening from a passive state into an active tool for gathering intelligence, understanding opponents, and projecting an aura of unshakable calm. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno of Citium, placed immense value on this skill, famously noting that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. This was not merely a clever aphorism, it was a guiding principle for conduct. The Stoics believed that speaking less was a direct exercise in self-control, a way to demonstrate mastery over one's impulses. Every time you choose not to interrupt, not to offer an unsolicited opinion, or not to defend yourself immediately against a slight, you are strengthening your inner citadel. You are proving to yourself that your sense of worth is not dependent on immediate external validation through speech. This restraint allows you to become a collector of valuable information while others, in their haste to be heard, often reveal their true intentions, their insecurities, and their strategic hand. Imagine a high-stakes meeting in the modern world, perhaps a negotiation or a project post-mortem that is growing heated. Voices are raised, fingers are pointed, and everyone is vying for airtime to defend their position or assign blame. The natural, impulsive reaction is to jump into the fray, to ensure your perspective is heard and your contributions are recognized. Now, picture the individual who chooses a different path. They sit back, they listen intently, they do not fidget or look impatient, their posture remains calm and engaged. Their silence is not perceived as weakness or ignorance, but as depth and composure. In the space created by their restraint, others inevitably fill the void. They talk more, they reveal their frustrations more openly. They sometimes even argue themselves into a corner or propose solutions that align perfectly with your unstated goals. By not reacting, you gain a panoramic view of the emotional and intellectual landscape of the room. You see the alliances, the anxieties, and the true sources of conflict with crystal clarity. When you do finally choose to speak, your words are not another volley in the chaos. They are a measured, insightful contribution that addresses the core issues, and they carry far more weight because they are born of observation, not reaction. This practice of strategic silence extends far beyond formal meetings. It is equally powerful in personal conversations. Consider a discussion where someone is criticizing you. The immediate impulse is to interrupt, to correct, to explain. But what if you simply allowed them to finish completely? The act of listening without defense often disarms the critic entirely. They run out of steam when they don't meet the resistance they expected. Furthermore, by hearing them out, you might actually uncover a useful piece of feedback buried beneath the poor delivery. You also give yourself the vital time to process your own emotional response and craft a reply that is principled rather than petty. Your silent composure in that moment communicates confidence more effectively than any witty retort ever could. The invitation here is to move this ancient theory into modern practice. Today, I want you to choose just one conversation. It could be with a coworker, a family member, or a friend, and make a conscious decision to practice intentional silence. Your goal is not to be uncommunicative, but to be deliberately restrained. Make an active effort to listen more than you speak. When you feel the urge to interrupt, pause and take a breath instead. Pay close attention not just to the words being said, but to the body language, the tone, and the underlying emotions. Notice the natural rhythm of the conversation and resist the need to fill every pause with your own voice. Afterward, take a moment to reflect on the experience. How did it feel? Did you gather information or insight you might otherwise have missed? Did the dynamic of the conversation shift? Did you feel more in control of your own emotional state? This is not about winning a social interaction. It is about training a muscle of inner restraint that, when strengthened, provides a foundation of poise that can withstand any public pressure. The Romans regularly confronted a subject we often treat as the ultimate taboo. They reflected on their own mortality, not with dread, but with a clear-eyed focus designed to intensify every single moment of life. This practice, known as Memento Mori, which translates to remember you must die, was far from a morbid obsession. It was a powerful psychological tool to cultivate urgency, gratitude, and profound perspective. In a culture famed for its pursuit of glory and legacy, the most disciplined Stoics understood that the awareness of life's inevitable end was the very key to living it well. By keeping the finiteness of their time firmly in view, they were able to cut through the trivial distractions, the petty grievances, and the endless procrastination that can quietly consume a lifetime. This wasn't about fearing death, it was about revering life too much to waste it. Marcus Aurelius, who penned his private thoughts while leading armies and governing an empire, constantly returned to this theme to ground himself. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This is the ultimate call to presence. He isn't suggesting we live in a state of paranoia, but rather that we use the reality of our mortality as a filter for our actions. If this day, this conversation, this project could literally be your last, how does that change its importance? How does it reshape your priorities? Suddenly, the argument you were about to pick seems trivial. The gratitude you were withholding feels urgent. The project you've been putting off demands to be started. The awareness of death becomes a lens that brings what truly matters into sharp, brilliant focus. while blurring out the noise that so often consumes our attention. We can integrate this ancient practice into our modern lives in simple yet transformative ways. It doesn't require dwelling on grim imagery. It can be as gentle as a momentary pause. Before you begin your next meal, take just 10 seconds to truly look at the food in front of you. Consider the improbability of it all: the sunlight, the rain, the farmers, the transporters, the cook, the incredible chain of events that brought this sustenance to you. Now consider that this could be the final meal you ever eat. This simple shift doesn't fill you with fear. It fills you with a deep, overwhelming appreciation for the experience itself. The taste is richer, the textures more vivid, the act of sharing it with others more meaningful. You are no longer just eating, you are fully engaging in the miracle of being alive to eat. This is Memento Mori in action, using the boundary of death to heighten your sensory and emotional experience of life. This reflection naturally leads to the most important question you can ask yourself, a question designed to instantly align your actions with your deepest values. How would you act today if you knew with absolute certainty that it was your final day? Not a day for grand, dramatic gestures necessarily, but a day for authentic, purposeful living. Would you spend an extra hour at the office scrolling through emails, or would you go home early to laugh with your family? Would you nurse that grudge you've been holding onto, or would you pick up the phone to offer forgiveness and seek peace? Would you worry about the opinion of someone you barely respect, or would you speak and act with the unwavering integrity of someone with nothing left to lose? Your answers to these questions are a direct mirror reflecting the gap between how you are currently spending your time and how you truly wish to spend it. The practice of Memento Mori closes that gap. It's the gentle but persistent whisper in your ear that reminds you not to wait for a crisis to start living like you mean it, because the crisis is already built into the contract of life itself. This remembrance is not a burden. It is the liberation of your most purposeful, present, and grateful self. Strip away the layers of emotional storytelling and see the event for exactly what it is, nothing more. This is the core of the Stoic practice known as objective description, and it is a powerful tool for dismantling the anxiety and frustration we so often layer onto the events of our lives. The Stoics observed that we rarely react to the pure facts of a situation. Instead, we react to the highly charged, subjective narrative we instantly wrap around those facts. We don't just experience a delay, we experience a catastrophic waste of my precious time that proves nothing ever goes right for me. This narrative, this story, is where almost all of our emotional suffering resides. Marcus Aurelius dedicated significant thought to this, urging himself to constantly pierce through the illusion of these value judgments. He advised himself to look at things not as they are represented, but in their true, bare nature, to see the essence of the event without the colorful and distorting commentary our ego loves to provide. Let's make this incredibly practical with a universal modern experience. You're driving to an important appointment, and you crest a hill to see a long, motionless line of brake lights ahead. The immediate, automatic thought that floods your mind is not neutral, it is laden with judgment and emotion. This is a nightmare. This traffic jam is going to ruin my entire day. Why does this always happen to me? This is terrible. Notice the language: nightmare, ruin, terrible. These are not descriptions of reality, they are emotional interpretations. They trigger a cascade of physiological stress responses: a clenched jaw, a tightness in your chest, anger at other drivers, and a sense of helpless frustration. Your body and mind are reacting as if you are in a genuine crisis, all because of the story you're telling yourself. Now, apply the discipline of objective description. You look at the same scene and consciously re-describe it using only plain, neutral, observable facts. You say to yourself, there are cars stopped on the road ahead. My vehicle is also stopped. The clock shows that I am moving slower than I had planned. That's it. There is no nightmare, no ruin, no terrible. There are just metal boxes on asphalt, not moving as quickly as you would prefer. This isn't about denying the inconvenience. It's about refusing to amplify it into a personal catastrophe. By stripping the event of its emotionally charged language, you drain it of its power to hijack your nervous system. The situation hasn't changed. You're still stuck in traffic, but your relationship to the situation has been completely transformed. You move from a state of agitated suffering to a state of calm observation. This creates the mental space to then ask a useful, practical question from a place of composure. Given that cars are stopped on the road, what is within my power to do? I can call ahead to notify them I will be late. I can put on an audiobook. I can use this time to think through a problem. The response is now rational and effective, not emotional and reactive. This practice extends far beyond traffic. Think of a criticism from your boss. The story might be, he's trying to undermine me and he hates my work. The objective description is, he said the report lacked specific data on the third quarter projections. Think of a rainy day. The story is, this miserable weather has ruined our picnic. The objective description is, water is falling from the sky and the ground is wet. The difference is everything. One pulls you into a drama where you are the victim. The other presents you with a simple, manageable reality. The objective fact is almost always less threatening, less personal, and far easier to address than the terrifying story our frightened mind concocts. Your challenge today is to become an archaeologist of your own thoughts, carefully brushing away the emotional sediment to uncover the bare artifact of the fact. Choose one stressful situation that arises. It could be a work deadline, a disagreement, a long line at the store. When you feel that familiar surge of frustration or anxiety, pause. Listen to the language your inner voice is using. Is it speaking in charged terms like disaster, unfair, or impossible? Now, consciously re-describe the event out loud or in your mind using only neutral, observational language. State only what a video camera would record without any editorial commentary. Pay close attention to the shift that occurs internally. The event itself may not vanish, but the secondary suffering, the layer of panic and drama you added yourself, will begin to dissolve, leaving you with a clear mind and a steady composure to handle what is actually in front of you. Now let's redefine a concept that is often misunderstood: acquiescence. In our modern culture, we frequently equate acceptance with passivity, with giving up or admitting defeat. But for the Stoic, acquiescence was something far more powerful and intelligent. It was the deliberate and strategic practice of aligning your will with reality itself, not in resignation, but in wise recognition of what is already true. This is not about rolling over. It is about stopping the exhausting and futile effort of trying to roll back the ocean. The Stoics understood that a tremendous amount of our mental and emotional energy is wasted fighting against conditions that are simply outside our control. By learning the art of acquiescence, they were able to conserve that precious energy and redirect it with laser focus toward the one thing they could always command: their own response. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and therefore understood powerlessness intimately, put this with stunning clarity. He said, "Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle: some things are within our control and some things are not." He then goes a crucial step further, arguing that peace is found not just in understanding this distinction, but in actively and willingly accepting it. He taught that we should never demand that events happen as we wish, but instead wish for them to happen as they do happen. This is the heart of intelligent alignment. It is the decision to stop arguing with reality. When you stop arguing with what is already fact, you are no longer at war with the universe. You become a cooperative partner with it, able to navigate its currents with grace rather than being drowned by your own resistance. Picture a powerful summer storm. The wind is howling, the rain is lashing against the windows, and you had planned an important outdoor event. The standard, untrained reaction is one of frustration and resistance. You might pace by the window, complain about the terrible timing, curse the weather forecast, and generally spend the next hour in a state of agitated powerlessness. Your entire emotional state is held hostage by the weather, something you have exactly zero ability to change. Now, contrast this with the Stoic approach of acquiescence. You look out the window, acknowledge the factual reality. A storm is happening. You immediately classify it in the outside my control column. Then, you willingly align your will with this reality. You might say to yourself, the universe has provided a storm today. This is what is. With that acceptance, your energy is instantly freed. You are no longer fighting the storm, you are working with it. You can now turn your attention to what is within your control. You can contact your guests to reschedule. You can light a candle and enjoy the unexpected coziness indoors. You can use the time to read or plan. The storm hasn't changed, but your suffering about the storm has vanished because you have ceased to resist it. Your composure remains intact because it is no longer tied to the weather behaving as you prefer. This practice transforms obstacles from brick walls into mere conditions of the landscape. The stubborn client isn't an immovable barrier. They are a fact of your professional environment that must be navigated. The cancelled flight isn't a personal injustice. It is a new variable in your travel equation. The difficult conversation you've been avoiding isn't a looming monster. It is a circumstance that exists and requires your thoughtful response. Acquiescence is the first step in this process, the clear-eyed, calm acknowledgement of what is. It is the essential foundation upon which all effective action is built. You cannot build a stable house on the shifting sands of denial and resistance. So I invite you to make this profoundly practical. Bring to mind one single thing in your life right now that you are actively resisting. It might be a small, daily irritation like the constant construction noise outside your window. It could be a larger life circumstance, like a health issue you're struggling to come to terms with, or a difficult personality in your workplace that you find yourself constantly battling against. Now, for just a moment, experiment with the art of acquiescence. Stop the internal argument. Stop wishing it were different. Instead, simply state the reality of the situation to yourself in plain, neutral language. Then consciously make the decision to accept it. This doesn't mean you have to like it or that you are giving up on ever changing it in the future if that becomes possible. It simply means that for today, you are choosing to stop wasting energy fighting the unchangeable facts. You are aligning yourself with reality, and in doing so, you are reclaiming the energy and the peace of mind to focus on what you can actually influence: your next move, your attitude, and your values. To be undisturbed by both praise and blame, this is the hallmark of a mind that has achieved true equanimity, a steady inner balance that remains unshaken by the shifting opinions of the external world. For the Roman elite, this wasn't a passive personality trait. It was an active, disciplined pursuit, a private training regimen designed to fortify the soul against the dual seductions of flattery and condemnation. They understood that public life was a theater of constant judgment, and to anchor one's sense of self-worth to the applause or hisses of the crowd was to hand over your inner peace to a fickle and unforgiving master. The goal was to develop a core self-assessment so solid and so clear that external feedback became merely data to be considered, not a verdict to be internalized. Seneca, who navigated the treacherous waters of Emperor Nero's court, wrote extensively on this delicate balance. He observed the foolishness of being emotionally tossed about by the crowd, noting that the same people who cheer you today may condemn you tomorrow. He argued that being uplifted by popular applause is as much a failure of character as being crushed by criticism, because both reactions reveal that your internal state is dependent on something outside your control. In one of his letters, he uses a powerful analogy: a rock standing firm in the midst of crashing waves. The water swirls around it, but the rock itself remains unmoved, its integrity intact regardless of whether the sea is calm or stormy. The Stoic aim was to become that rock within oneself, to build an identity so resilient that neither success nor failure could fundamentally alter your course or your composure. Imagine a skilled musician, a virtuoso who has practiced for decades. They walk onto a stage to perform a complex piece. One night, the audience is enraptured. They leap to their feet in a roaring standing ovation. The next night, in a different city, the performance is technically identical, but the crowd is subdued, offering only polite, scattered applause. The untrained performer might be euphoric after the first show and despondent after the second, their entire emotional landscape dictated by the external reaction. The performer who has cultivated equanimity, however, has a different internal experience. They measure their success against their own rigorous standard. Did I execute the piece with the technical precision I intended? Did I connect with the emotional core of the music? Was my focus absolute throughout? The applause is enjoyed as a pleasant social ritual, but it does not define the worth of the performance. The tepid reaction is noted as a curious cultural difference, perhaps, but it does not trigger self-doubt. Their satisfaction comes from the integrity of their own effort, a private score they keep for themselves. This inner stability is what allows artists, leaders, and thinkers to continue innovating and taking creative risks, rather than being trapped in a cycle of pandering to public opinion for their next fix of validation. This practice requires brutal self-honesty. Most of us are entirely unaware of how much our moods and self-perception fluctuate based on tiny signals from our environment. A few likes on a social media post can provide a fleeting high. A critical comment can ruin an hour. A compliment from a boss can make us feel capable and seen. A passing slight from a colleague can make us feel insecure and small. We are constantly, subtly, handing over the reins of our inner world to strangers and circumstances. The Stoic exercise is to first simply notice this happening without judgment. For the next 24 hours, I want you to become a quiet observer of your own emotional weather patterns. Pay attention to the specific moments your mood lifts or dips based on external validation or the lack thereof. When you feel a surge of pride after a compliment, acknowledge it. When you feel a pang of irritation after a criticism, note it. The goal isn't to stop feeling these things, that's nearly impossible, but to create a tiny gap between the external trigger and your absorption of it. In that gap, you can ask a simple, empowering question. Is this external opinion more true or more important than my own assessment of my effort and my character? By practicing this moment of pause, you begin the vital work of steadying yourself, of recalibrating your inner compass to point toward your own virtues rather than the volatile winds of public opinion. You start building the unshakable foundation of a composure that is truly your own. Begin each day not by checking your phone or rushing into the chaos, but by deliberately anticipating the challenges ahead. This was a cornerstone of the Stoic morning ritual. a private mental rehearsal that transformed the day from a series of reactive emergencies into a sequence of opportunities to practice virtue. The Stoics didn't see this as pessimistic planning for the worst. They viewed it as strategic preparation for reality. By walking through the potential obstacles and interruptions of the coming hours in the safe space of their own mind, they were effectively vaccinating themselves against surprise, frustration, and panic. This practice ensured that when difficulty inevitably arose, they weren't caught off guard. They were meeting an old acquaintance they had already prepared for. Marcus Aurelius perfectly captured this proactive mindset in his private writings. He advised himself, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Now, this might sound incredibly cynical at first glance, but his intention was the opposite. He wasn't condemning humanity. He was inoculating himself against disappointment. He was continuing, "They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil." This is the crucial reframe. By anticipating that people might act from their own ignorance or pain rather than from a place of malice specifically targeted at him, he could approach them with a calm, compassionate detachment instead of taking their behavior personally. This premeditation allowed him to respond with wisdom rather than react with anger. Let's translate this ancient practice into a modern, practical routine you can start today. It takes just 2 minutes. As you sip your morning coffee or before you step out the door, close your eyes, mentally scroll through your calendar. Identify one event that has the potential to be stressful or challenging. Perhaps it's a difficult conversation with a direct report, a presentation to a skeptical audience, or even just a long commute that typically frays your nerves. Now, don't just worry about it, actively visualize it, see the room, picture the faces, hear the types of questions or criticisms that might come your way. This is where the magic happens. Instead of visualizing yourself getting flustered or defensive, you now rehearse your ideal, virtuous response. What would it look like to respond to a tough question with patience and clarity? How would you embody courage if you had to deliver unwelcome news? What would compassion sound like in your voice when dealing with a frustrated colleague? You are not just hoping to be calm, you are building neural pathways for calmness. You are programming your default setting for that situation. This 2-minute mental drill does something profound. It moves you from a passive passenger in your day to the conscious driver. You are no longer at the mercy of external events. You are preparing your internal resources to meet them. When you then walk into that meeting you visualized, it feels familiar. The challenging comment arises, and instead of a surge of panic, you experience a moment of recognition. "Ah, this is that scenario I prepared for." Your response then flows not from a place of fight or flight, but from the calm center you cultivated in the quiet of your morning. Your composure is no longer a hope, it's a practice plan. This small daily investment in private preparation pays the highest possible public dividend, the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you are ready for whatever the day may bring. This might come as a surprise, but true Stoic poise has absolutely nothing to do with being cold, detached, or unfeeling. In fact, the Roman elite understood that a fortress like inner Citadel was not meant to isolate them from others, but to provide a stable foundation from which they could engage with the world and the people in it with genuine compassion and generosity. Their composure wasn't a wall to keep people out. It was a wellspring of inner peace that allowed them to extend kindness outward, even when it wasn't required or reciprocated. This practice of deliberate kindness was seen as essential training for social harmony, and just as importantly, for their own tranquility. They discovered that acting with empathy was not a drain on their energy, but a surprising source of it, a way to reinforce their own values and protect their peace from the corrosive effects of bitterness and resentment. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, constantly reminded himself of this in his private journals. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil." Now, read that not as a cynical dismissal of humanity, but as a profound exercise in empathy. He is not condemning these people, he is explaining their behavior. He is reminding himself that difficult actions usually stem from a place of internal struggle, ignorance, or pain. This perspective allows for patience instead of provocation. It's much harder to take someone's rudeness personally when you see it as a symptom of their own inner battle, a reflection of their poor character rather than a judgment on your own. This mental shift transforms a potential conflict into an opportunity for compassion. Let's make this incredibly practical. Imagine you're in a coffee shop, tired and perhaps a little stressed, and you finally get to the front of the line. The barista, who looks equally exhausted, snaps at you for not knowing your order quickly enough. The immediate, raw impulse is to snap back, to put them in their place, to match their energy with your own frustration. This feels justified, even satisfying in the moment, but the Stoic, trained in this practice of kindness, would pause and see the scene differently. They wouldn't see a rude employee. They'd see a human being who is likely overworked, underappreciated, and having a difficult day. Instead of retaliating, they might take a breath and offer a genuine, "Looks like it's been a long morning. I appreciate you being here." This isn't about being a pushover. It's about exercising a superior form of control over your own reactions. You have chosen to respond with patience, and in doing so, you have completely disarmed the situation. You walk away with your composure not just intact, but strengthened, because you acted in alignment with your virtue. The barista might walk away feeling slightly seen for the first time that day. Your small act of kindness didn't just benefit them, it fortified you. This is the beautiful, often overlooked secret of Stoic compassion. It's a practice that benefits the giver as much as the receiver. Every time you choose patience over pettiness or generosity over grievance, you are making a deposit into your own emotional resilience. You are proving to yourself that your inner peace is not dependent on everyone else behaving perfectly. It is a resource you can access and distribute, even in less than ideal conditions. The Romans knew that a society functions better when its members practice this, but they also knew it was the ultimate private training for a tranquil mind. You cannot truly be at peace within yourself if you are constantly at war with everyone else. So here is a direct and simple challenge, one you can begin in the next hour. I want you to perform one small, completely unnoticed act of kindness today. Don't do it for recognition or thanks. Do it as a private exercise for your own character. It could be as simple as sending a complimentary email about a coworker to their boss without seeing them, letting someone go ahead of you in a long line, or leaving a larger than necessary tip for a server. The key is that it be deliberate and unseen. After you do it, pay close attention to the internal shift. Notice the quiet sense of satisfaction that comes not from external validation, but from the private knowledge that you have chosen to act from a place of abundance and principle, rather than scarcity and reaction. This is how you weave kindness into the fabric of your composure, building a strength that is both unassailable and deeply human. How you treat your body directly trains your will, forging a physical resilience that becomes the bedrock of mental fortitude. The Roman elite understood this intimate connection with a clarity we often miss today. They saw the body not as a separate entity to be pampered or ignored, but as the essential instrument of the soul, the tangible vessel through which character and composure are expressed and strengthened. For them, physical rigor was never about vanity or punishment. It was a fundamental form of private training for public mastery. By deliberately embracing physical challenges and exercising control over their corporeal form, they were building the muscular endurance of their discipline, conditioning themselves to endure discomfort without complaint and to maintain grace under pressure. This practice ensured that when their mind commanded action, their body would obey without hesitation, and when external chaos threatened their peace, their physical presence would remain a pillar of calm. The Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus was particularly vocal on this point, arguing that philosophy was incomplete without physical training. He famously stated, "That is why the philosopher must practice both, the training of the mind and the training of the body." He saw them not as separate pursuits, but as two sides of the same coin, each essential for a life of virtue. He used a powerful analogy. Just as a craftsman cannot produce fine work with broken or poorly maintained tools, a soul cannot act with excellence and composure if it is housed in a body that is weak, indulgent, or disobedient. The body, in his view, was the soul's primary instrument. If the instrument is out of tune, brittle, or unreliable, even the most beautiful music of the mind will fail to be played correctly. A senator might practice this by foregoing his litter and walking long distances across Rome, not for speed, but for the steady, enduring effort. A general might train with his soldiers, not because he had to, but to share in the hardship and strengthen his own capacity for endurance. These were constant, private reminders that comfort was a choice, not a necessity, and that true strength was measured by one's command over one's own physical being. We can integrate this ancient wisdom into the fabric of our modern lives with astonishing simplicity, and one of the most immediately accessible practices is the conscious control of posture. Think of a moment of high stress you've experienced, perhaps receiving difficult feedback or navigating a tense negotiation. Notice what happens to your body instinctively. Shoulders slump forward, head drops, chest caves in a physical posture of defeat, withdrawal, and vulnerability that then sends a confirming signal back to the brain, amplifying the feelings of stress and anxiety. Now imagine intervening in that cycle. The moment you feel that familiar tension arise, you consciously choose to sit or stand differently. You draw your shoulders back gently, lift your chin, and plant your feet firmly on the floor. You take a deep, intentional breath that expands your chest. This is not about posing for others. It is a private, physical act of self-command. You are not pretending to be confident. You are using the architecture of your body to create the conditions for confidence to emerge. By adopting a posture of stability and openness, you send a powerful counter-signal to your nervous system that says, "I am not under immediate threat. I am grounded, I can handle this." This tiny, physical adjustment creates a foothold for mental steadiness, a tangible anchor in the midst of emotional turbulence. The question, then, is not whether this connection exists, but how you will choose to cultivate it. What single, sustainable physical habit could you adopt to directly support your mental steadiness? The answer doesn't have to be a dramatic 2-hour daily gym routine. Lasting change is built on small, consistent actions. It could be a commitment to take a 5-minute walk outside without your phone after lunch, using the time not for distraction but to simply feel the rhythm of your body and the ground beneath your feet. It could be the decision to always take the stairs, treating each flight not as an inconvenience but as a miniature workout in resilience. It could be as simple as pausing every hour at your desk to perform 2 minutes of gentle stretching, reasserting control over a body that is often forgotten during mental work. The specific practice matters less than the intention behind it. You are engaging in a deliberate act of physical discipline to reinforce your mental discipline. You are proving to yourself through the direct language of sensation and effort that you are capable of mastering your impulses, enduring minor discomforts, and maintaining command over your entire being. Each time you choose the harder physical option, you are not just building muscle, you are fortifying your will, ensuring that when life demands true strength, your body and mind will respond as one integrated, unshakable whole. Not every thought that enters your mind deserves your belief or your emotional energy. This is one of the most empowering ideas Stoicism offers us: the concept that our initial, raw impressions of events are not facts to be blindly accepted, but suggestions to be rigorously examined. The Roman elite trained themselves to become gatekeepers of their own minds, understanding that between an external event and their emotional response stood a crucial, defendable space, the space of judgment. In that space lay their freedom. They practiced the art of interrogating every impression that arrived at the door of their consciousness, especially the disturbing ones, asking for its credentials before granting it entry and allowing it to influence their state of being. This private, mental discipline was their primary defense against being hijacked by every passing feeling or external provocation, ensuring their public composure remained unbroken. The philosopher Epictetus, whose teachings were dedicated to practical daily living, gave us the clearest instruction on this practice. He said, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test." This is a revolutionary approach to our own thoughts. We are so often passive recipients of our mental chatter, treating every anxious or angry thought as an undeniable truth. Epictetus hands us the reins. He tells us to pause, to create that vital gap, and to become an investigator of our own internal world. The goal is not to suppress the impression, but to understand it, to question its validity, and to consciously choose whether to assent to it, to give it our agreement and let it shape our reality. Let's make this intensely practical with a scenario you will undoubtedly recognize. You're in a meeting and you share an idea you're genuinely excited about. A colleague across the table listens, then offers a brief, dismissive comment before moving on. The immediate, automatic impression that flashes into your mind is, "He thinks my idea is stupid. He doesn't respect me, I've embarrassed myself." This impression carries with it a powerful emotional charge, a hot flush of shame, a sinking feeling in your stomach, a surge of defensiveness. The untrained mind, operating on autopilot, accepts this impression as absolute truth. It then dictates your behavior for the rest of the meeting. You withdraw, you stop contributing. You might even start crafting a counter-argument fueled by resentment. Your entire emotional state and subsequent performance have been commandeered by an unchallenged initial thought. Now apply the Stoic interrogation. Instead of accepting that first impression, you pause internally. You gently but firmly say to it, "Hold on, let me test you." You ask a series of simple, clarifying questions. Is it truly a fact that he thinks my idea is stupid? Do I have any direct evidence for that, or is this my interpretation of his tone? Could his dismissive comment have been a result of his own preoccupations? Perhaps he's stressed about an unrelated deadline. Is it possible he simply didn't understand the idea fully, and his comment wasn't a value judgment at all? Is this comment genuinely harmful to me, or is the harm coming primarily from my own perception of it? This process of examination, which takes mere seconds, completely changes the dynamic. You might conclude that the impression was, in fact, a distorted story you told yourself. By refusing to assent to it, you drain it of its power. The flush of shame subsides. You remain engaged in the meeting, your composure intact. You have not been controlled by an external event. You have exercised command over your internal one. This practice transforms you from a passive victim of your thoughts into an active architect of your emotional landscape. It is the ultimate private training for public grace because it addresses the problem at its source, not out in the world, but inside your own mind. The person who can calmly question their own automatic negative thoughts is a person who cannot be easily knocked off balance by criticism, setbacks, or the unpredictable behavior of others. Their stability comes from within. Your invitation is to begin this training with the smallest of impressions. Today, make it your goal to catch just one automatic negative thought. It doesn't have to be a major event. It could be the instant frustration you feel when you see a long line at the coffee shop, or the minor irritation when someone cuts you off in traffic. The moment you feel that familiar negative surge, hit the mental pause button. Acknowledge the impression without judgment. There is the thought that this delay is ruining my morning. Then gently interrogate it. Is that objectively true? Is this line truly powerful enough to ruin several hours of my day? Or is that an exaggeration? What is a more neutral, factual way to describe this situation? By practicing on these small, daily annoyances, you are building the mental muscle and the neurological pathways that will allow you to deploy this skill effortlessly when a truly significant challenge arises. You are learning to be the master of your impressions rather than letting your impressions be the master of you. Draw a circle around only what truly matters. This powerful visual exercise lies at the heart of the Stoic practice known as the circle of concern, and it is a masterclass in energetic and emotional conservation. The Roman elite, constantly bombarded with the political gossip, social dramas, and endless distractions of a bustling empire, understood that a scattered focus was the enemy of a composed and effective life. They trained themselves to make a critical distinction between what was worthy of their precious attention and what was merely noise. Their private discipline was to relentlessly narrow their focus down to a tight, unwavering circle that contained only their own judgments, their own actions, and their core virtues. Everything outside of that circle, the opinions of others, the latest rumors, the trivial scandals, the outcomes of events they could not control, was to be consciously ignored. This wasn't about being uninformed, it was about being intentional, about refusing to let the chattering of the world dictate the priorities of the mind. Marcus Aurelius, amidst the overwhelming demands of leading an empire, constantly reinforced this boundary for himself. He wrote in his private journal, "You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow." This simple, piercing statement cuts to the core of the practice. The distraction isn't just external busyness, it's the internal procrastination of virtue, the choice to focus on tomorrow's potential problems or yesterday's grievances instead of the singular opportunity for right action that exists in this present moment. In another passage, he is even more direct, advising himself to avoid all talk of what so is doing and why, and all speculation about the latest political gossip. He saw this kind of conversation as a drain on vital energy, a pointless expenditure of mental focus on things that were not within his circle of control and did not contribute to his own moral progress. By drawing this clear line, he was able to conserve his finite energy for the tasks that truly demanded his wisdom and leadership. Let's bring this into a scenario you will instantly recognize. You're at work and a colleague pulls you aside, eager to share the latest office gossip. They want to dissect why a certain project was reassigned, to speculate about a manager's personal life, or to complain bitterly about a policy change. The conversation is engaging in a superficial, dramatic way. It makes you feel included, in the know. The untrained response is to lean in, to contribute your own theories, to spend 20 minutes immersed in this speculative drama. Now apply the Stoic circle. You recognize that this entire conversation exists firmly outside your circle of concern. You cannot control the project reassignment. You have no business speculating about personal lives, and the policy change, while perhaps frustrating, is now a reality to be worked with, not a rumor to be lamented. The Stoic move is not to be rude or dismissive, but to gracefully decline to enter the fray. You might listen briefly out of politeness, then gently disengage by saying, "I appreciate you letting me know, but I should probably focus on preparing for my 1 o'clock meeting." You have not just saved 20 minutes of time, you have preserved a much more valuable resource, your mental clarity and emotional equilibrium. You have chosen not to clutter your mind with information that is not only useless but also potentially agitating. You walk away with your focus intact, your energy undrained, and your composure unshaken, ready to devote yourself to the tasks that actually align with your goals and values. This practice is about so much more than just avoiding gossip. It's about conducting a full audit of your attention. How much of your day is spent mentally wrestling with things you cannot change? How much energy is expended worrying about a future outcome, resenting a past decision, or obsessing over another person's opinion? All of this is energy poured outside your circle, energy that is lost forever. The Stoic redraws the circle, pulling all of that focus back inward onto the only territory where they are truly sovereign, their own choices, their own efforts, their own character. This creates a remarkable sense of agency and calm, because you are no longer trying to manage an uncontrollable external world. You are focusing on perfecting your response to it. So I want to make this deeply personal and practical for you right now. Pause for a moment and ask yourself this clarifying question. If you had to define your circle of concern, what would be inside it? What are the 3 to 5 core values that represent what truly matters to you? Not what you think should matter, but what actually guides your best decisions and gives your life a sense of purpose. Is it integrity? Is it compassion for your family? Is it mastery in your craft? Is it contributing to your community? Take just 60 seconds to list them, either mentally or on a piece of paper. Now, with that circle clearly defined, conduct a quick review of your actions today. How much of your mental energy and your time was spent inside that circle, actively nurturing those values, and how much was spent outside of it on distractions, on worry, on things that, in the grand scheme of your life, simply do not matter? This isn't an exercise in self-judgment, it's an exercise in awareness. It's the first and most crucial step in consciously choosing where to place your attention tomorrow. By clearly defining what is inside your circle, you give yourself the power to gracefully and without guilt let everything else fade into the background, freeing up an immense reservoir of focus for building a life of purposeful composure. Gratitude might seem like a simple, almost sentimental concept, but for the Stoic Romans, it was a formidable discipline of the mind, a powerful antidote to the poisons of entitlement and chronic dissatisfaction that can so easily erode our composure. In a society of immense wealth and extreme inequality, the elite who practiced Stoicism understood that a sense of entitlement, the belief that life owed them comfort, admiration, and ease, was a profound weakness. It made them vulnerable to every minor inconvenience and every unmet expectation. The habitual practice of gratitude was their private corrective, a daily mental exercise designed to systematically dismantle this entitlement and replace it with a deep, unshakable appreciation for the simple fact of existence itself. This wasn't about feeling briefly thankful for a windfall. It was about cultivating a fundamental orientation toward life that saw every benefit, however small, as a gift rather than a guarantee. The Roman habit was one of conscious, deliberate reflection on their advantages. At the end of a day before sleep, they wouldn't just tally their accomplishments, they would inventory their benefits. This could range from the profound, their health, their family, their friends, to the seemingly mundane, the taste of clean water, the warmth of the sun on their face, the reliability of a well-made pair of sandals, or the availability of a good book to read. The philosopher Seneca, a man who possessed staggering wealth but was also intimately familiar with exile and loss, captured this practice perfectly. He advised, "Let us appreciate our friends while they are with us, and not wait until they have passed away to remember them with gratitude. Let us enjoy the food that is set before us, and the wine that we drink, and the servants who serve us. Let us count our blessings one by one." His point was urgent. We must not wait for the threat of loss to jolt us into appreciation. We must practice seeing the value of what we have now, precisely because it could be gone tomorrow. This constant awareness wasn't meant to foster a paranoid anxiety about loss, but rather to create a rich, vibrant intensity in our present experience, transforming ordinary moments into sources of sustained joy and stability. This ancient practice finds a powerful echo in modern psychology, which has consistently shown that a regular gratitude practice can significantly lower stress, reduce anxiety, and increase overall life satisfaction. The Stoics, of course, weren't concerned with clinical studies. They were concerned with building a resilient character. They knew that a mind trained to look for and appreciate benefits is a mind that is far less likely to be thrown off balance by life's inevitable setbacks and frustrations. The person who starts their day feeling genuinely grateful for the roof over their head is less derailed by a traffic jam. The leader who is thankful for their team's effort is less rattled by a single negative comment. Gratitude grounds us in what is real and good and present, providing a ballast of positivity that prevents us from being capsized by the waves of negativity. Integrating this into your life can be beautifully simple and requires no special tools. One of the most effective methods is to adopt a nightly ritual, just as the Romans did. In the last quiet minutes before sleep, instead of scrolling through a screen that fills your mind with comparison and desire, turn your attention inward. Mentally list 3 specific things from your day that you are grateful for. The key is in the specificity. Don't just say, "My family." Think, "I am grateful for the way my daughter laughed uncontrollably at dinner tonight." Don't just say, "My job." Think, "I am grateful for the productive conversation I had with my colleague this afternoon that solved a persistent problem." This specificity forces you to actively replay positive moments, searing them into your memory and reinforcing the neural pathways associated with appreciation. Over time, this doesn't just change your evening routine, it changes the very filter through you view your entire day. You begin to subconsciously start looking for these gratitude moments as you live them, training your perception to highlight the good that is always present amidst the chaos. So I invite you to press pause on the momentum of your day for just a moment. Don't wait for tonight. Right now, bring to mind one single thing that you typically take for granted but are truly, deeply grateful for. It might be the effortless functioning of your body that allows you to take a deep breath. It could be the reliable electricity that powers the device you're using to listen to this. It might be the presence of a person in your life who accepts you exactly as you are. Hold that one thing in your mind. Sit with the feeling of appreciation for it, not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible reality. Notice how this simple act of focus, this momentary acknowledgement of a gift, shifts your inner state. However subtly, It draws you away from what you lack and anchors you firmly in what you have. This is the grounding power of gratitude. It turns what we have into enough, and in doing so, it builds a foundation of contentment that no external circumstance can easily shake. Who do you look to for guidance when the path gets difficult, when your plans fall apart, or when you face a challenge that feels too big to handle alone? For the Stoics, the answer was never to look inward in isolation, but to look outward and backward, to surround themselves with a council of the wisest, most resilient minds in history. They understood that in our weakest moments, we often lack the clarity to see the virtuous path forward. Our own judgment can be clouded by fear, anger, or self-pity. This is precisely why they made a deliberate practice of studying the lives of extraordinary historical figures, not as distant legends, but as practical mentors for everyday living. They would immerse themselves in the stories of these paragons of virtue, internalizing their responses to adversity so thoroughly that when a similar challenge arose in their own lives, they could almost hear the whisper of their chosen guide, offering a model for how to proceed with courage and integrity. The Roman Stoics had a pantheon of such heroes, but two figures stood as towering examples. There was Cato the Younger, a senator whose unwavering defiance in the face of Julius Caesar's tyranny became the ultimate Stoic lesson in living by principle, even unto death. Cato chose to take his own life rather than live under a dictator, a final, brutal act of freedom that the Stoics saw not as a tragedy, but as the ultimate expression of a will that could not be conquered. Then there was Socrates, the philosophical grandfather of Stoicism, who calmly accepted his unjust execution sentence, using his final hours not for panic or pleading, but for reasoned discourse with his friends. His serene acceptance of death, his refusal to escape when given the chance because it would violate the laws of the city, taught a masterclass in prioritizing one's principles above one's very life. The Romans didn't just read about these men, they communed with them. They asked themselves, in moments of ethical dilemma or personal crisis, what would Cato do in this situation, or how would Socrates face this fear? This was not about blind imitation. It was about using these exemplars as a North Star, a constant reference point for what was possible in human character. This ancient practice translates with stunning relevance into our modern world. Imagine an entrepreneur whose first startup has just collapsed. The investors have pulled out, the employees have been let go, and the public failure feels utterly humiliating. The easy, natural response is to hide, to succumb to shame, to let the experience define them as a failure. But if this entrepreneur has a role model, perhaps they've deeply studied the story of someone like Steve Jobs, who was famously ousted from his own company only to return and lead it to unprecedented heights. They have a completely different script available. They can ask, how did Jobs handle his exile? He didn't see it as an end. He saw it as a liberating opportunity to found NXT and Pixar, to learn and innovate without the constraints of Apple's corporate structure. This historical parallel doesn't guarantee the same outcome, but it provides a powerful framework for resilience. It reframes the catastrophic failure from a final verdict into a potential beginning, a necessary setback in a longer story of eventual triumph. The mentor's life becomes a map showing that this terrifying territory has been navigated before. Your own path to greater composure can be profoundly shaped by this same exercise. The invitation here is not to simply acknowledge that historical figures existed, but to actively adopt one as a personal guide. I want you to choose one person from history whose character and response to adversity you deeply admire. It doesn't have to be a philosopher or a famous leader. It could be a scientist who persisted through thousands of failed experiments, an artist who worked in obscurity for decades, or a human rights activist who stood firm against immense oppression. Once you've chosen your figure, your task is to go beyond a Wikipedia summary. Read their biographies, their letters, their own words if available. Study the specific moments where they faced rejection, loss, fear, or temptation. Pay close attention not just to what they did, but to the principles that guided their actions. What virtue were they embodying? Was it courage, patience, unwavering justice, creative persistence? Then make this practice active. The next time you face a difficult decision, a moment of anger, or a period of doubt, consciously pause and ask the question, how would my chosen role model handle this? What principle would guide them? By doing this, you are not escaping into the past. You are building a bridge from their wisdom to your present moment, drawing on the accumulated strength of human history to fortify your own resolve and navigate your challenges with a grace that is both learned and earned. The engine of so much of our daily anxiety and frustration can be traced back to two powerful forces: a relentless craving for things we do not have, and a powerful aversion to experiences we do not want. The Stoics saw these twin forces, desire and aversion, as the primary disruptors of our inner peace, and they developed a rigorous private training to bring them under conscious command. This wasn't about eliminating all wants or becoming numb to discomfort. It was about making a critical distinction between our natural, biological impulses and the runaway, excessive versions we create in our minds. A natural desire for nourishing food is healthy. A gnawing craving for a specific gourmet meal that leads to frustration when it's unavailable is a source of self-inflicted suffering. A natural aversion to putting your hand in a fire is essential for survival. An aversion to a difficult conversation that you know needs to happen is an avoidance that creates far greater long-term pain. The Roman elite practiced identifying this difference, learning to reduce their emotional investment in externals while strengthening their focus on the one thing that could never be taken from them: their own virtue and integrity. Epictetus, who understood the price of slavery and the true meaning of freedom, placed this practice at the very center of his philosophy. He offered a stunningly simple formula for liberation. Freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. At first glance, this sounds almost inhuman, but he isn't talking about the desire for water when you are thirsty. He is talking about the insatiable desire for status, for validation, for more and more material possessions, for life to always conform to our personal preferences. This type of desire, he argued, is a form of self-imposed slavery because it chains our happiness to things outside our control. The same is true for aversion. When we are averse to any form of discomfort, criticism, or failure, we become prisoners to fortune, constantly arranging our lives to avoid these feelings and living in fear of their arrival. True freedom, in the Stoic sense, comes from wanting only what is within your power, your own efforts, your judgments, your values, and accepting whatever else life brings with a steady mind. Let's make this concrete with a professional example that will feel familiar to many. Imagine you are working toward a promotion. You want it deeply. You see the title, the salary increase, the recognition. This desire in itself isn't wrong, but notice how it can subtly shift from a healthy motivation into a source of anxiety and compromised principles. The untrained mind becomes fixated on the outcome, the promotion itself, which is ultimately in the hands of your bosses and subject to company budgets and office politics, all firmly outside your control. This fixation breeds worry, jealousy toward colleagues, and a temptation to cut corners or engage in self-promotion at the expense of teamwork. Your happiness becomes contingent on a future event that may or may not happen. The Stoic approach involves a profound mental pivot. You consciously redirect your desire from the external reward, the promotion, to the internal action that is entirely within your control, doing excellent work. Your goal is no longer get promoted. Your goal becomes be the most diligent, collaborative, and valuable person on my team today. You pour all of your energy into the quality of your effort, the integrity of your actions, and the virtue you bring to your tasks. The potential promotion moves from being the source of your desire to a potential byproduct of your excellence. This shift is transformative. If the promotion comes, it is welcomed with humble appreciation, not as a validation of your worth, but as a pleasant outcome. If it does not come, your core project remains intact and unviolated. You can still look at yourself in the mirror with pride because your goal was to do excellent work and you achieved it. Your self-worth remains untarnished because it was never tied to the title in the first place. This practice of managing desire and aversion is a daily, moment-to-minute discipline. It's about noticing the subtle pull of wanting and the subtle push of avoiding and gently correcting your course. It's choosing to want a peaceful mind more than you want to win an argument. It's choosing to want integrity more than you want to avoid a difficult truth. It's choosing to value your own effort more than you value the external reward. The freedom this generates is not an abstract idea. It is a tangible sense of relief and self-possession. You are no longer a puppet whose strings are pulled by every advertisement that creates a new desire or every social situation that triggers an aversion. You become the puppeteer, consciously directing your wants and dislikes toward the only thing that can provide lasting stability, your own character. So I want to offer you a practical challenge, one you can begin in the next hour. Look at your life right now and identify one specific desire you can consciously choose to loosen your grip on today. It doesn't have to be a grand, life-changing ambition. It could be the desire for a particular food you know you shouldn't have, the desire for a certain number of likes on a social media post, or the desire for your commute to be completely free of traffic. Notice the tension that this desire creates in you, the slight sense of lack or frustration that comes from wanting something that is not currently present. Now make the conscious decision to relax your mental grip on it. You are not abandoning the goal. You are simply transferring your focus from the uncontrollable outcome to the controllable process. If it's the desire for a peaceful commute, focus instead on your choice to listen to an inspiring podcast or to practice patience when the car in front of you brakes. By doing this, you are not giving up, you are growing up. You are trading the fleeting satisfaction of a fulfilled craving for the enduring power of self-mastery, taking one more step toward the ultimate Stoic goal, wanting nothing more than what you already have within you. Reframe your understanding of solitude completely. See it not as a state of loneliness to be avoided, but as a vital training ground for the mind, a private gymnasium for the soul. In the hyper-social world of ancient Rome, where public life was a relentless performance of status and politics, the most disciplined members of the elite didn't see solitude as a punishment or a sign of social failure. They sought it out deliberately, scheduling it into their lives with the same intention we might schedule a meeting or a workout. This was their essential time for deep reflection, for uninterrupted reading of philosophy, and for the critical mental strengthening required to withstand the immense pressures of their public roles. It was in these quiet, self-imposed retreats that they could step off the stage, drop the persona, and reconnect with their core principles, away from the distorting noise of applause, criticism, and social obligation. Seneca, the Stoic statesman and dramatist, was a powerful advocate for this regular withdrawal. He wrote in his letters, "You must withdraw into yourself as much as you can. Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving. The process is mutual, for people learn while they teach." Notice the order here. The withdrawal into oneself comes first. It is the foundational practice. he understood that you cannot bring a calm, steady presence to your interactions with others if you are perpetually frazzled, overstimulated, and unfamiliar with your own inner landscape. Solitude was the necessary recalibration, the time to process the events of the day, to examine one's reactions, and to fortify one's resolve before stepping back into the fray. For the Roman elite, this wasn't a luxury. It was a non-negotiable component of their mental hygiene, the way they sharpened their most important tool, their own judgment. We live in a world that has virtually declared war on solitude. Our pockets contain devices designed to fill every spare second with stimulation, a notification, a scroll, a message, a podcast. We have become so accustomed to this constant external input that the very idea of being alone with our own thoughts for even a few minutes can feel uncomfortable, even anxiety-inducing. We confuse being alone with being lonely, and in our rush to avoid the latter, we sacrifice the profound benefits of the former. The Stoic practice stands in stark opposition to this. It is the deliberate, courageous act of switching off the external world to switch on your internal one. It is in the quiet that you can finally hear your own voice, separate from the echoes of everyone else's opinions and expectations. This is where the most valuable insights are often found. Consider a challenge you've been wrestling with, perhaps a decision at work, a tension in a relationship, or a personal goal that feels out of reach. You've likely discussed it with friends, read about it, maybe even lost sleep over it while your mind churns in circles. Now, imagine giving yourself the gift of 10 minutes of pure, undistracted solitude. No phone, no music, no background noise. You sit quietly, perhaps with a notebook, and you simply let your mind wander around the edges of that problem without forcing a solution. In the absence of external noise, your own intuition often finds the space to speak up. You might suddenly remember a forgotten piece of advice, see the situation from a completely new angle, or simply arrive at a deep sense of clarity about what the next right step is. This isn't magic. It's the natural consequence of allowing your brain the downtime it needs to integrate information and make novel connections, free from the constant demand to react to the outside world. So I pose a question to you, one that is an invitation to experiment. What unexpected insight might emerge if you intentionally carved out just 10 minutes today to be completely alone with your thoughts? Don't make it complicated. You don't need a meditation cushion or a silent retreat. Simply find a quiet corner, a park bench, or even just sit in your car before you go inside. Set a timer if it helps, and for those 10 minutes, do nothing but be present with your own mind. You might be surprised by what surfaces: a creative idea you'd suppressed, a gratitude you'd overlooked, or a simple sense of calm you didn't realize you were missing. This practice of solitude is how you build a relationship with yourself, and that relationship is the bedrock of all other composure. When you are comfortable in your own company, you are never truly alone, and you carry a sanctuary of peace within you that no crowd can disrupt. How do you handle feedback, especially when it feels harsh or unfair, without that immediate defensive wall slamming down? For most of us, that instinct to protect ourselves, to justify our actions and rebut the critique, is our default setting. We hear criticism and we instantly interpret it as an attack on our character, our competence, or our value. The Stoics, however, saw this common reaction as a tremendous waste of a precious resource and a lost opportunity for genuine growth. They developed a radical, counterintuitive practice of not just enduring criticism, but actively welcoming it, training themselves to see every piece of feedback, no matter how poorly delivered, as a potential goldmine of useful data to improve themselves. This wasn't about becoming a doormat or agreeing with every critique. It was about exercising supreme emotional discipline to extract value from every interaction, thereby turning even their critics into unwitting teachers. Marcus Aurelius, a man who faced constant and often vicious criticism from political rivals, military subordinates, and even family members, constantly reinforced this mindset in his private writings. He advised himself, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." The harm is to persist in one's own self-deception and ignorance. This is a breathtakingly humble and powerful stance for the most powerful man on earth to take. He isn't saying that every critic is correct. He is saying that his own commitment to truth and improvement is so absolute that he is willing to listen to anyone who might offer a piece of it, even if it arrives wrapped in anger or malice. He makes the pursuit of wisdom more important than the protection of his ego. In another passage, he goes even further, reminding himself that we can learn something even from those who wrong us, because they show us patience we need to develop or a blind spot we need to address. This reframes the entire dynamic. The person offering criticism is no longer an adversary. They are a mirror, showing you a reflection you might not have seen otherwise. Let's bring this into a scenario that will feel intensely familiar. You've just delivered a presentation you worked on for weeks. You feel it went well. Later, a colleague pulls you aside and says, "Look, I have to be honest, that section on the financial projections was really confusing. I'm not sure you presented the data clearly, and I think a few people tuned out." The untrained, automatic response is visceral. Your stomach clenches, your mind instantly races to defend your work. They're wrong. The data was perfectly clear. They just weren't paying attention. Maybe they're jealous of the project's potential. This defensive internal monologue then dictates your external reaction. You might offer a tight-lipped "thanks for the feedback," while silently seething, or worse, you might start arguing your point right there in the hallway. The entire interaction becomes a conflict, and you walk away angry, having learned nothing except that you feel unfairly judged. Now, apply the Stoic practice. The same criticism arrives. You feel that initial flush of defensiveness that's natural, but instead of letting it control you, you insert the mindful pause. You take a breath. You remember that your colleague's opinion is outside your control, but your response is firmly within it. You consciously choose to see their comment not as a verdict on your worth, but as a single data point about your presentation's effectiveness. Your response, therefore, shifts completely. You might look at them and say, with genuine curiosity, "Thank you for telling me that. I wanted to be clear. Can you help me understand which part specifically felt confusing?" This single sentence is a game changer. It does several things at once. It de-escalates the situation immediately. It signals confidence and a commitment to excellence rather than fragility. Most importantly, it opens the door to potentially valuable information. Perhaps they misinterpreted one of your charts, revealing a design flaw you can fix for next time. Maybe they have a valid point about the pacing of that section. By responding with curiosity instead of resistance, you transform a potential ego-bruising conflict into a collaborative problem-solving session. You haven't agreed that you did a bad job. You've simply agreed to investigate the truth of the observation. This practice requires divorcing your self-worth from the critique. Your work is not you. Your presentation is not your soul. It is a thing you created, and like all created things, it can be improved. When someone offers a critique, they are offering feedback on the artifact, not a final judgment on the artist. This mental separation gives you the breathing room to evaluate the feedback objectively. You can ask yourself the Stoic questions: is there any truth to this? Even if the delivery was poor, is there a kernel of useful insight here? If there is, you have gained something invaluable. If, upon calm reflection, you determine the criticism is entirely without merit, you can simply discard it without ever having gotten upset in the first place. You win in either scenario. Your composure remains intact because you are guided by reason, not reflex. The next time you find yourself on the receiving end of a critical comment, whether from a boss, a partner, or a friend, I encourage you to try this approach. Before the defensiveness can take root, consciously choose one small act of curiosity. Ask a single clarifying question. Say a genuine "thank you for the feedback." In that moment, you are not being weak. You are demonstrating a strength so profound that few ever achieve it, the strength to value your own growth more highly than your own pride. True composure is not a passive state to be admired. It is an active virtue, expressed moment by moment through the choices we make and the deeds we do. This is the final and perhaps most crucial piece of the Stoic puzzle, the discipline of action. For all their private reflection and mental fortification, the Roman elite understood that philosophy was meaningless if it did not manifest in the real world through purposeful, principled conduct. Their ultimate aim was not to simply feel calm, but to act rightly, to translate their inner steadiness into outward integrity, regardless of whether anyone was watching, applauding, or even actively opposing them. This was the highest test of their training, to do the right thing simply because it is the right thing, divorcing their actions entirely from the hope of external reward or the fear of external consequence. The philosopher Epictetus, who lived a life far removed from the luxury of the Roman aristocracy, put this in the clearest possible terms. He taught, "Don't hope that events will turn out the way you want. Welcome events in whichever way they happen. This is the path to peace." But he didn't stop with passive acceptance. He directly linked this peace to action, advising, "What ought one to say then as each hardship comes? I was practicing for this, I was training for this." This training culminated in the unwavering commitment to virtuous action. He famously said that our job is to do our duty, to play our assigned part well, and to do so without getting a ticket, meaning without seeking recognition or payment for simply doing what is required of a good human being. The reward for a virtuous action is not praise or profit. The reward is the integrity of having performed the virtuous action itself. This transforms morality from a transaction, be good to get something, into a personal standard of excellence that you uphold for its own sake. Imagine the power of this principle in practice. Consider the act of helping someone anonymously. You see a stranger struggling with heavy bags, their hands full and frustration mounting. The easy, almost automatic impulse might be to help them and then bask in the warm glow of their gratitude, to receive the immediate social reward of being seen as a kind person. There's nothing wrong with that, but the Stoic would take it a step further as a form of advanced training. They would perform the exact same helpful act, lifting the bags, holding the door, but then they would simply melt back into the crowd before any thanks could be offered. Why? Because this anonymous act severs the direct link between the action and the external validation. It proves to yourself in a tangible way that your motivation was pure. You didn't help for the thank you. You helped because help was needed, and it was within your power to provide it. The satisfaction you feel afterward is not dependent on another person's reaction. It comes entirely from the private knowledge that you acted in alignment with your principles. This is how you build an identity as someone who is helpful, rather than someone who merely wants to be seen as helpful. Your composure becomes unshakable because your sense of self-worth is no longer outsourced to the opinions of others. It is generated internally by your own consistent actions. This discipline extends far beyond simple kindness into every corner of our professional and personal lives. It's the employee who does their work with meticulous care even when the boss is on vacation, because their standard of excellence is internal, not dependent on surveillance. It's the leader who makes the ethically difficult choice that will benefit the company in the long run, even though it will be unpopular in the short term and may never be fully understood or appreciated by their team. It's the parent who patiently listens to a child's long, rambling story, not because they have to, but because it is an act of love and respect. In each case, the action is its own reward. The quality of the effort is not contingent on the audience. This is the essence of Stoic poise in motion, a calm, steady, and relentless commitment to doing what is right, fueled by an inner compass rather than the shifting winds of external approval. Your challenge and the most practical way to integrate this entire philosophy into your life today is to make this abstract concept breathtakingly real. Before this day is done, I want you to perform one single action purely out of principle, with a conscious intention to expect absolutely nothing in return. It doesn't have to be a grand, dramatic gesture. In fact, it's better if it's small and simple. It could be cleaning up a mess in the office kitchen that you didn't make. It could be sending a genuine compliment to a colleague via email and deliberately not checking to see if they reply. It could be making a small donation to a cause you believe in without telling a soul. The key is in your mindset as you do it. As you perform this action, silently dedicated to your own integrity, remind yourself that you are doing this not for praise, not for reciprocity, not for any outcome at all, but simply because it aligns with your values. Then, once it's done, let it go completely. Do not look for a result. Simply carry the quiet satisfaction of having done it with you. This small, intentional exercise is more than just a good deed. It is the final rep in your private training, the moment you prove to yourself that your virtue is not for show. It is who you are, and that is the only reward you will ever need. Now, as the day draws to a close and the world outside grows quiet, we arrive at one of the most transformative and intimate of all the Stoic practices, the nightly ritual of the evening review. This was not merely a replay of the day's events or a mental to-do list for tomorrow. For the Roman elite, this was a sacred, private audit of the soul, a meticulous process of holding their own actions up to the unwavering light of virtue to see what was aligned and what was not. In the silence of their homes, away from the public eye and the noise of the forum, they would engage in a fearless conversation with themselves, not to punish their failures, but to understand them, to learn from them, and to prepare themselves to meet the next day with greater wisdom and composure. The philosopher Seneca, a master of this practice, described it with beautiful clarity in his letters. He wrote, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now become mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said. I hide nothing from myself, I pass nothing by." Imagine the power of that moment of radical honesty. There is no audience here, no one to perform for. It is just you and the truth of your own character. Seneca continues, asking himself pointed questions that cut to the heart of the Stoic project. What bad habit have you cured today? What fault have you resisted? In what respect are you better? This is not a narcissistic exercise, it is the opposite. It is a humble, rigorous effort to identify the gap between the person you aspire to be and the person your actions revealed you to be today, with the sole intention of closing that gap tomorrow. So how do we translate this ancient ritual into a practical modern habit? It begins with two deceptively simple questions that serve as powerful guides for your introspection. First, ask yourself, where did I let externals control my inner peace today? This question gets to the very core of Stoic philosophy. Was there a moment when your emotional state was hijacked by something outside your control? Perhaps a critical email sent you into an hour-long spiral of anxiety and resentment. Maybe a traffic jam triggered an outburst of anger that lingered long after you arrived at your destination. Or it could be that your mood was disproportionately lifted by a piece of praise, making your sense of worth dependent on another person's opinion. Identifying these moments is not about self-flagellation. It's about pinpointing the precise leaks in your emotional resilience. It's showing you where you handed the reins of your happiness over to fortune, so you can learn to take them back. The second question is its empowering counterpart. Where did I act with courage or integrity today? This is just as crucial. Stoicism isn't only about correcting faults, it's about reinforcing strength. Did you speak up for a colleague when it would have been easier to stay silent? Did you choose to do the right thing on a project, even though an easier, less ethical path was available? Did you practice patience with a loved one when you were feeling tired and irritable? By consciously acknowledging these victories, no matter how small, you are actively wiring your brain to recognize and repeat virtuous behavior. You are building an identity for yourself as someone who is courageous, patient, and just, not because you say you are, but because you have the evidence of your own actions to prove it. The true magic of this practice reveals itself not in a single night, but over time, as patterns begin to emerge in your private ledger. You might notice that your peace is most frequently disturbed not by major catastrophes, but by a particular type of interaction. Maybe you have a deep-seated sensitivity to perceived disrespect. Or you might discover a hidden wellspring of courage you didn't know you had, realizing that you consistently act with principle in situations involving fairness. This pattern recognition is the ultimate reward of the evening review. It moves you from managing symptoms to understanding the root causes of your reactions, giving you a detailed map of your own psyche. With this map in hand, you are no longer navigating your days on autopilot, blindly reacting to stimuli. You are the conscious pilot, able to anticipate your own triggers and proactively choose a more virtuous course. This is how private reflection forges public composure, one honest, examined evening at a time. And so we arrive at the core truth that has echoed through every one of these practices. Absolute poise is not a gift bestowed at birth, but a fortress built brick by brick through daily, private discipline. It is not the absence of fear or anxiety, but the hard-won ability to move through it with clarity and purpose, a skill forged in the quiet moments you spend with your own mind long before you ever step into the public eye. The Roman elite understood that the composure they displayed in the Senate or on the battlefield was merely the visible tip of an immense iceberg, the final, outward expression of a relentless private training regimen that touched every facet of their perception, their judgment, and their character. They knew that to command the respect of others, they first had to achieve complete command over themselves. We have walked through the tools they used to construct this unshakable foundation. We explored the mental rehearsal of negative visualization, which strips future hardships of their power to shock and terrify us. We examined the liberating clarity of the dichotomy of control, that essential filter that separates the waters of what we can influence from the vast ocean of what we cannot, teaching us to invest our energy only where it truly counts. And we practiced creating that vital mindful response gap, the crucial pause between a triggering event and our chosen reaction, which is the very birthplace of our freedom and our power. These are not abstract philosophical concepts. They are practical, accessible drills for the mind, each one designed to strengthen a different muscle of your resilience. The Stoic journey, then, does not end with understanding these ideas. It begins with practicing them. It is not a spectator sport. The philosopher Epictetus, who knew more than most about turning adversity into strength, offered a perfect closing thought. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. And then he gave us the path to that peace, Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle: some things are within our control and some things are not. This is the profound peace that awaits not a life free of challenges, but a life where challenges no longer dictate your inner state. Your invitation is not to master all of this at once, but to begin. Do not be overwhelmed by the scope of this ancient wisdom. Instead, look back over these practices and choose just one. Just one. Perhaps it is the evening review of your day, or the mindful pause before you respond to a difficult email, or the practice of reframing a problem using objective description. Commit to that single practice for just 1 week. Carry it with you like a secret tool, applying it in small, everyday moments. Notice what shifts within you. You will find that these are not 27 separate techniques, but rather a single, interconnected system for living, and that mastery of one naturally leads to understanding the next. This is the end of our exploration for today, but it is the very beginning of yours. If you found value in uncovering these ancient secrets for modern resilience, consider subscribing to this channel. We are dedicated to unearthing more timeless wisdom from Stoicism and beyond, and providing you with practical, actionable ways to apply it to the challenges of your own life. Thank you for investing this time in your own growth. Now go forth and build your fortress one deliberate stone at a time.